Hello, welcome to week 6, Reclaiming Our Lives from Trauma. This week we go, instead of really adding a new layer of narrative, you really have all of the layers now. You have, each week you've been building on those layers, starting back with the early work around dual listening and then moving into externalization and then looking at witnessing and remembering our story and then adding to that migration of identity. And so now we're adding, with last week and this week, we're beginning to add some sort of specialized perspectives along with those layers. And at the same time, hopefully you're beginning to get a sense of what it means when narrative therapists talk about thickening the story. So as we continue to work through the learning assignments and activities, I encourage you to continue to think about that in that sense, that once we do those, help people with those initial layers of narrative, we're beginning at the same time to help them thicken, which is really build out and strengthen this new preferred story that they're writing, this new construction, co-constructive story you're part of. As the narrative therapist, you're part of this co-construction, not in the driver's seat, certainly, but you're there in that affirming witnessing role, and you're there in a supportive role and an encouraging role, and sometimes as the scribe, the one who's helping to capture the important changes as the person is working through this this new authorship of the story that they are becoming. So this week we look at how narrative treats trauma, how narrative approaches trauma, and keeping in mind that trauma, unfortunately, I wish I could say it was a unique and a fairly, non-prevalent event, and sadly, as we all know, that's not the case. The vast majority of people who come to see a counselor, certainly that come to see a clinical social worker, come because of some connection to trauma, either single incident or more common, some kind of cumulative sustained effects of trauma over time. And so it would be very unusual not to see for somebody not to have any kind of trauma history at all. That just unfortunately doesn't happen. That doesn't mean that's all bad. I mean, things happen, right? Some things are really horrific, and they are bad. They're just bad. There's no way of making them good. There are other things that happen to us that can, through what we would call post-traumatic growth, actually may in the long run serve us positively in positive ways. So it's having that acknowledgement, that awareness that trauma underlies most of the human struggles that we deal with. There are certainly organic things as well. We as trained assessors, we're going to make sure that we're having people that are experiencing significant serious symptoms, that we have them go through a complete medical workup, and that we work in partnership with medical providers to make sure that if there is some other biological things happening at the same time, that we're partnering on those and providing comprehensive team care. So this week you look at trauma. I spend a little bit of time in the overview talking about things other than narrative, giving you sort of a update on trauma in general in terms of best practices and what's recommended for treatment. Most notably because narrative, the way I learn it, have learned it, practice it, and others like me, other narrative therapists. Um, uh, Surprisingly, it's not listed in the top treatments for trauma, at least not in the top three. You'll see there are some references to various narrative like treatments, but they're not the narrative that you're learning in this course. They're pieces of it in some ways. So you have an opportunity to build and add to the collective learning and experience and research with this really amazing approach to working with folks. And one of the things that I love about narrative and trauma, my history is that I was trained in prolonged exposure therapy, and which works, and it is one of the top recommendations for trauma. And for many years, 5 years roughly, I did prolonged exposure work with people who had experienced significant trauma and were having lingering, lasting effects from that. And what I learned when I actually stumbled into narrative about 5 or 6 years into my practice, I discovered that narrative also works really well with trauma, and it's a softer, gentler approach than exposure. It doesn't require people to relive the specific details of their trauma unless they choose to. I mean, some people do. Some people want to process that and need to process that. Others, it's not helpful. So you'll have an opportunity to examine that, study how narrative does this and how it approaches trauma. Some couple of really good videos this week. Beads of Life is a narrative therapy with children who've been diagnosed with a medical condition. Super video. And Letters to Friends. I hope you get a chance to really sit with both of those. Some good articles, and then of course your Denborough reading and your readings in the Burek Weiss book. So you'll have another reading journal this week and a discussion on narrative with trauma, and a chance to process that at a deeper level. So hope you appreciate this perspective. Hope you find it makes sense, resonates with you, and I look forward to talking with you in another week. So take care out there.